More than 3 decades, Burma has been isolated from the rest of the world, but has not been isolated from upheaval.
Last year, thousands of pro-democracy protesters were killed in Burma. Recently, CNN's Mike Chinoy became the first American television correspondent allowed into the country in 26 years. Tonight, he begins a 5-part series called Inside Burma.
This is Burma, and it is quite unlike any other land you know. Rudyard Kipling wrote those words nearly a century ago, captivated, like many others, with what was known as the Golden Land, a mystical, enchanting place of glittering pagodas and devoutly Buddhist people, inward-looking, isolated, but blessed with such abundant natural resources, from rubies to oil to extraordinarily fertile farmland, that it was once the world's biggest exporter of rice and the wealthiest nation in Southeast Asia. But it has been a long time since the term the Golden Land had any connection with the reality of Burma, for this is a country whose promise has been snuffed out by years of repression and savagery, leaving its economy in shambles and its people cowed by a brutal military dictatorship. Just over a year ago, after 6 months of almost continuous demonstrations for democracy led by students and Buddhist monks, the Burmese army took total control of the country, killing over 1,000 civilians in the process. The crackdown generated widespread international condemnation, prompting the United States and other Western countries to cut off aid. But it wasn't exactly a military coup. The army, controlled by a longtime strongman, General Ne Win, had dominated the country for nearly 30 years, shutting it off from the outside world, smothering its economy with bureaucracy and controls, leaving it frozen in time, from the unchanged British colonial architecture of its decaying capital, Rangoon, to a daily life that has hardly improved since the end of World War II. But last year's explosion of pent-up public discontent forced Ne Win and his generals to strip away the veneer of civilian administration that had disguised their underlying power. Since then, Burma has been a country occupied by its own army, under martial law, its citizens' dreams of democracy and progress stifled by the bullet.
Crowd.
But we start tonight with our special series of reports on Burma. It was once known as the Golden Land. But since the Second World War, poverty has increased as government control smothered the country. CNN's Mike Chinoy recently became the first American television correspondent to be allowed into Burma. In this, the second of his 5-part series, he reports on the fear and repression there.
There is a timeless quality to life in Burma, a sense of people going about their business much as they have for generations. From the bustling markets to the shrines packed with worshippers, to the itinerant medicine men hawking potions of highly unusual origins. But beneath the surface calm, Rangoon is a city of fear, as Burma's military regime tightens its grip a year after seizing outright control of the government. Under the circumstances, many people here are too frightened to talk about what is happening, but diplomats and other observers, both Burmese and foreign, say there is credible evidence of mass arrests and torture, including beatings, sleep deprivation, and the use of electric shock. The most prominent political prisoner is the overwhelmingly popular democracy campaigner Aung San Suu Kyi. She's been held under house arrest behind these walls since July. There are thought to be thousands of others, although the regime claims they're all just common criminals.
There have not been human rights violations in this country. Those who were arrested were not arrested on political grounds. They were arrested on the violation of the law.
In Rangoon, young men have been among the chief victims of what one diplomat called this subdued reign of terror. Many press-ganged off the streets and forced, under intolerable conditions to serve as porters in the army's continuing jungle war against Burma's rebellious ethnic minorities.
If they do not get enough food, when they try to escape from this, if they know, they beat and even they kill these people.
The repression has extended to action against Buddhist monks, many of whom played leading roles in last year's demonstrations for democracy. In newly reopened primary and secondary schools, continuing anti-government feelings are also causing concern to the authorities. Rangoon University, where the disturbances began, remains closed. It's intimidation on a massive scale, embittering and alienating almost the entire country.
But we start tonight with Burma. For 3 decades, the military has ruled that country, controlling Burma's economic and political life. In the third part of our special series on the country, CNN correspondent Mike Shnoy takes a look at the Burmese leadership.
It is a society within a society, a warrior elite, one of the toughest fighting forces in Asia, used to having its way on and off the battlefield. For nearly 30 years, the Burmese army has fought ethnic insurgents in the jungle while dominating the economic and political life of the country.
Military here has had a tradition of having to come in and take over the reins of administration.
This warrior caste has, since 1962, owed its allegiance to Burma's modern-day emperor, General Ne Win, now nominally retired but still pulling the strings. To most Burmese, Ne Win is a reclusive, eccentric, frightening figure.
So most of the politicians are very much afraid of him.
His obsession with astrology and fortune-telling has contributed much to the country's current misery.
Ne Win's most powerful advisor is his personal astrologer. Ne Win's lucky number is 9, and we'll find that all important decisions are made on dates which add up to 9.
Last year's military takeover, for example, took place on the 18th day of the 9th month, 1 + 8 equaling 9. Earlier, Ne Win had suddenly withdrawn from circulation all high-denomination notes of the Burmese currency, the Chot. And he replaced them with these, 45 Chot notes and 90 Chot notes. The only currency in the world with such denominations, and for one reason, 4 + 5 equals 9. At a stroke, 60% of Burma's money became worthless. The life savings of millions disappeared overnight. Major factor behind the 1988 demonstrations for democracy. Today, the soldiers taking orders from Ne Win are following in his supernatural footsteps. Numerous pedestrian footbridges are being built for no apparent reason. Why? The regime says bridge building brings merit and health to the devout Buddhist, and perhaps of greater importance to an unpopular military government, longevity as well. For all their eccentricities, Ne Win and his henchmen now claim to have recognized the need for reform in Burmese society. But most of Burma's long-suffering Williams.
We start tonight with Burma. The country known as the Golden Land was once one of the wealthiest nations in Asia. Now it's one of the poorest. In the fourth part of our special series on Burma, CNN's Mike Shnoy looks at how the Burmese government has squandered the country's wealth.
27 years ago, the government here inaugurated what it called the Burmese way to socialism. It was a voyage, economic disaster. It took one of the wealthiest nations in Southeast Asia and, through a melange of Marxism, Buddhism, isolationism, and military rule, formulated by strongman Ne Win, turned it into a basket case. Burma today is a country where the average urban worker earns 15 cents a day, where malnutrition is rampant, They're only a black market of smuggled goods as large as the state-run economy allows people to survive. But now the country's martial law government is promising a major change in direction.
Things are changing very fast. Yes, we are going from a centrally planned economy to an open market-oriented economy.
So far, however, all the talk about reform remains just that, talk. There is little indication Burma's military rulers are moving to fundamentally change the way the economy is run here. Despite a new port in Rangoon and exploration agreements with several Western oil companies, foreign investors are holding back. Burma's natural resources and cheap, literate workforce cannot overcome the absence of a private banking system, a complicated bureaucracy, and a currency that is almost worthless. Officially, it's 6 Burmese kyat to $1. On the black market, it's nearly 80, but the government refuses to allow a devaluation.
The open door policy is not taking place. It won't take place unless you rationalize the kyat-dollar exchange ratio, you know.
In effect, I mean, the economic reforms in Burma have had no other effect than legalizing the black market and placing the black market in the hands of the military.
The Burmese road to socialism may have been officially declared dead, but the military government here continues to keep a stranglehold on what could be one of the most vibrant
The nation's most popular opposition leader is still being held in detention, as CNN's Mike Chenoy reports in the final part of his series on Burma.
She is an unlikely heroine, an academic in England for most of her adult life, married to a British college professor. But 44-year-old Aung San Suu Kyi is the daughter of the man who led Burma to independence. That and her courage in campaigning for an end to military rule here electrified this country in the past year, and in July led a frightened regime to place her under house arrest. Aung San Suu Kyi's detention came as the military government began preparations for national elections next May, training workers for polling stations, registering political parties, insisting the vote will be free and fair.
We have turned around 180 degrees. So if we are heading for a democratic system.
But the trappings of democratic procedure have not disguised a government effort to shape the electoral laws to its own advantage.
You can't assemble more than 5 people at a time. That sort of restriction. And then we can't publish our views in the press. Indeed, there's only one newspaper owned by the government.
Despite international pressure, the military has shown no willingness to release Aung San Suu Kyi and let her run in the upcoming campaign.
Aung San Suu Kyi is tremendously popular. She is the symbol of the true democracy movement in Burma. And I think it's fair to say that if she was allowed to contest elections, there would be a clean sweep.
To a cynical population, the government's maneuvering in many ways resembles a traditional Burmese puppet show, an elaborate charade by which the military is seeking an easily controllable civilian facade to legitimize and perpetuate its rule. Until the vote is held, there'll be no way to tell if it offers any hope for an end to Burma's troubles. In the meantime, many Burmese are recalling an old Buddhist prayer here. Keep me free from the 5 enemies: water, fire, robbers, those who wish evil on others, and above all,